Okay, so we'll take questions.
Can I start off with one question? Actually, go back to your original slide. I know I read the slides before you presented, but I now have the question. Go back to the one that has the 4 or 5 points that you said you're going to talk about as to what are the considerations.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is, why is number 7 not a function of consumers and competition?
Yeah, why is where does consumer and competition lie in here, right? Because I guess from an operator's point of view, it's all great because it's all internal, yeah, and how we can make money. But if you're looking at Malaysia generally, yeah, and I guess we're talking about Malaysia, right? Not US or India. We're talking about Malaysia. Where does that sit? Number one. Number two, I know you've given a lot of examples about what's happening around the world, okay? And in the context of you guys, because you guys have been, in fact, you're based in Malaysia. Where is Malaysia now? Where do you think Malaysia should start? And is Malaysia ready? So if the answer, and I don't know the answer, if the answer is yes, EBITDA is creeping down, and customers' complaints are getting higher, and therefore more money needs to be spent on technology, this is the way to go. Is today the day?
So let me answer the first question, Irwin, which was on where is consumer and competition actually figured in here. It is actually figured in building the whole business case for sharing, right? Because when you're looking at, and there was a question before which came in saying that if actually I get into a mode of network sharing wherein I give more coverage to another operator, am I actually cannibalizing myself or not, right? Am I actually kind of giving up on some strategic advantage that I have? Then the answer is really in terms of what are you actually looking at in terms of the overall benefit of this exercise, right? So I'm just going to rephrase that answer because that kind of addresses this. So when you're looking at the business case, it's not about top line or cost per se. It is actually about the bottom line. It's about how can I enhance value for myself, which means in a more common sense would be how can I increase my EBITDA, right? That's what we're looking at. Now, what we have been urging, and this is where many of the operators have failed when they've got into these kinds of agreements, is that they have not considered the potential impact on their business, either because of competition or because of the fact that they haven't really factored in consumer behavior would change, right? And hence the requirement of from my perspective of what I require from the network can actually change over the next few years. Now, in the context of Malaysia, it's important because, and this is where I'm really very, very firm about the fact that, and I think one area to really tap into quickly is sharing transmission. The reason being, with 4G coming in, with having more and more data uptake, invariably capacity will be an issue, and the place where capacity becomes an issue fundamentally is on the transmission side. That's where, and that is an easy way to actually, kind of look at in terms of all the operators would have to look at enhancing their capacity. Now, can you find a mechanism by which you can do it so that you don't build in redundancy, right? So the consumer behavior is actually going to change because your services are going to change, and hence the adoption of the services are going to actually fundamentally change. Now, competition, now how is competition actually getting factored in out here? For example, is what is going to, when I'm going to build my business case, I also look at, what are the substitutes that exist? How are OTTs actually going to, kind of, erode my ARPU in the future? And that's a fact, that's happening, right? So hence, when I build my business case, automatically I'm having more and more pressure on my EBITDA. So that is where, your modeling of your business case is wherein you just do not bring in the benefit of sharing infrastructure, but also from the top line modeling perspective, you look at how is my revenue going to actually change for the next few years, and that's how you build the whole case. Your second question, in fact, that was the first piece that we talked about. With respect to Malaysia, I think I would say it's high time that we do it. It's not even, it's now that we should do it. We should have done it yesterday, right? We have started doing certain things, and I think, MCMC is playing a good role in terms of, trying to, push the agenda forward, because EBITDAs are coming down. And EBITDAs will come down even further later because of substitutes, because of the fact that if you do not do this, you're going to spend a lot of capex later. So essentially what you'll have is you'll not have enough money to actually service your financial obligations, etc., and which is going to really hammer, it's going to become a downhill spiral essentially. So the answer to that is EBITDA. One is previously we had a thing wherein the EBITDA is coming down. And secondly, the next slide says the future is in data.
Yeah.
Data as a percentage of revenue is going up. So essentially what's going to happen is you actually need to put in more and more capex to service these kinds of needs.
Yeah.
So
the consumer wants
we have to do it now.
data capacity. How do we give data capacity at an investment? And the data capacity requires investment. So this is where the consumer wants, because this is clearly the future, and this is what the consumer wants. But how do we provision this capacity for the consumer? It requires capex, and with EBITDAs going down, and with the ability to monetize your capex, because your competition is now, and that's the key thing. What I just mentioned is the competition cannot just be other telcos. The competition is now expanding to OTT players. So it's the traditional form of competition in telecom is breaking down. It's now becoming OTT players. It's becoming from fixed line to mobile to MVNO operators. So the overall market is becoming bigger. So the pie is reducing for everyone. And so how do you maintain capex which the consumer wants and not be able to monetize it the same way that you were doing it before? And that's where the whole concept comes, where you need to share to be able to do it. That's the only way, that's the only sustainable way that we see going forward that this can happen. And this is what every country is facing, every operator across the world are facing.
In fact, the other phenomenon which is happening is that data is becoming more and more prevalent. The bargaining power of the people who have content is increasing. That's happening over the people who have the infrastructure, in this case telcos. So earlier, infrastructure service, I'm just putting telcos as infrastructure just to distinguish between the application guys. When infrastructure was more at the higher end of the bargaining power, the revenue sharing model was more favorable towards the telcos. Now with more and more of these applications coming in, content becoming big, what is going to happen is the bargaining power is going to shift. So which means that essentially the share of the revenue that the telcos would get eventually would start shrinking. That's a fact, but you will compensate it with more volume. That's what you'll have to do, right? But essentially per unit it will start coming down. So that's another push which is going to be on the ARPU. So these are all the factors. Now when you really model this, you have to really think of those things, because you cannot model it purely looking at your network and seeing as to what can be done. You have to look at it from an overall business objective. What is my business plan going to look like, and how does this actually fit into that? Yeah. Answer your question.
We can take another question from the floor. Okay. If not, we'll read the questions from the Twitter. First, we have, please share your view on fixed network infra sharing. For example, pools, ducts, and manholes. Is it effective for long-term benefit of end users?
Okay. Yeah, I think this presentation was largely focused on mobile, but fixed is something that operators have been doing for a long time, right? I mean, yes, ducts, manholes is definitely something that every operator is sharing now, mainly because the fixed network evolution was a little different than mobile network. The fixed network evolved from legacy incumbent players who largely owned the infrastructure previously, and then there was a point in time when the market opened up and competitors came in, and the regulator then stepped in and said that the incumbent player cannot have all the access to the legacy equipment. So the fixed sharing started way back than mobile sharing, right? So there was open loop. So the end loop was open to operators, and then the ducts were open, and then the fiber was open, and then the cabinets and equipment spaces were open. So all of this happened in the fixed network long back, right? It's in the mobile network, which evolved newly, is where sharing was limited, mainly because of the fact that people are focused more on customer growth rather than cost at some point, and then now they started trying to focus on cost reduction. So I see that fixed network has always been under the sharing purview. The regulator has always been the first one to kind of almost mandate the incumbent operators to open up the fixed network to other operators to use, and hence I think this will continue happening. And currently with all the broadband and all the investments that are happening in national broadband networks, where there is one national broadband provider with the government providing investments to build that network, I think this is even going to continue to go further.
I can ask a question, can I? Okay. Hi, my name is Sharil. How much information have you had about what's happening or not happening in Malaysia in terms of infrastructure sharing and network sharing?
Well, we have some examples from some of our clients, but I think some of the talks that are happening are not very open, so we don't have too much information.
Right.
Yeah.
How has been the reception, or how have your clients received some of these thoughts about network sharing?
The experience so far has been that all of them have been enthusiastic. I think the issue comes is that, see, the problem is, somebody pointed out earlier, is that with the EBITDA margins at that level, right? Currently the focus on reducing costs is probably not too high, but then everybody realizes that this is not sustainable going forward, right? Given the fact that the competition is to OTTs, given the fact that capital investments coming in. So all of them have been enthusiastic to discuss this topic further, but in terms of mutually talking to each other, I believe it has not gone too far. I might be wrong. I don't have too much, inside news into this, so probably it's not gone too far. But definitely, we see that there's a lot of interest from the clients that we spoke to.
A lot of interest, but perhaps little movement.
Yeah, I think that would be a good way to characterize that.
Okay. Now, this is Sharil, Chairman of MCMC, going to talk. If you don't move the way we want you to move, you can tell your bosses, we will fine you. The regulator has been pushing the issue of infra sharing, both passive and active, for umpteen years. We were one of the first. If you go back to your chart there that talks about the levels of sharing, you ask these guys, who forced them to do MOCAN and MORAD with incentives? Nowhere else in the world it was done. It was done here in Malaysia in 2021. When all of them were awarded a 2.6 gigahertz 4G spectrum, it was mandated in the letter of award that they must share. What I got coming back was a 4 logo letter, 5 logo letter, 6 logo letter saying why it cannot be done, instead of why it could be done. So, for once, I'm asking nicely, do not test your regulator. I expect things to be done. Because you can see today we're suffering from lack of investment in the infrastructure, lack of investment in CAPEX. You've seen now the hits that we're getting as an industry the last 2-3 days. Cambodia faster than Malaysia, according to UCLA. How is that possible? So, take this message back to your bosses. The chairman is not very happy at the moment. We've already asked you all many times, and we've incentivized you. Here, you know that if you go on a MOCAN sharing, you save a lot of money paying spectrum to us. If you go MORAD, you save lesser money, but if you go on your own, you don't save much money. But they still insist on going on their own. I cannot understand why. We've opened up the HSBB transmission arrangement 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Some have signed up, some haven't. Some insist that they're going to do their own fiber as well. Why? Makes no economic sense. Now you've got these two gentlemen here who've been taking you through in greater detail. They have far more patience than I do in doing this. I suggest you listen to that very carefully. Because after this, I'm not going to be patient anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato' Sri Sharil. The second question is from the Twitter. Apart from network, do you foresee the sharing model can be expanded to other elements such as content sharing?
Well, that's That's something that
Yes.
the answer is always yes. I'm trying to see is whether whether it's a priority right now, and I don't see too many examples of content sharing. But content sharing is something that is is definitely possible. See, in my opinion, content is currently moving from operators to a lot of the OTT players, right? So, how do operators come into this ecosystem and create an innovation where they are able to innovate on content, right? That's a whole different topic. I think sharing is probably the easiest of it all, but how do operators come in and start controlling the content is probably the bigger question to ask, right? And what are the innovative models there, and how do you innovate there? I think is a whole different topic. But yeah, from a purely sharing point of view, yes, it is possible. But whether that is the future, I'm not very sure about.
I think content in terms of infrastructure, definitely. The
Infrastructure,
infrastructure
yes.
which actually, kind of puts the content on. But what's happening is that content nowadays is no longer owned by the telcos. The content is actually owned by third parties, right? Most of it. That's going to be the trend. So there's an intermediation in any case. There's intermediation in terms of what telcos own versus what is provided by third parties. So if you look at it actually, on their end, in any case, they share infrastructure for the content. So technically, you can always kind of share infrastructure.
Okay, final questions that I have on the Twitter. You have shared good success stories, but can you also share the story of failures, why they failed?
Okay, so I think one of the reasons was that we wanted to build enthusiasm for this rather than talk about failures. So, see, the problem with failures is that the failures are often not very well studied, mainly because they're often not very public. We know with our experience with some of our clients is that we know that there are a few cases of sharing that we have also been part of, but the problem is that it's not very well studied and operators do not want to reveal too much information about it. So, because the reason is that they spend 2 years or 3 years sometimes making the deal happen, spending costs to make it happen, and then when the deal falls through, it really is not something that they want to talk about too much in public, right? So unfortunately, we do not have too many examples where we can give you a lot of insights from, apart from the ones that we already know about. But that really is the issue.
So, we can't at this point in time nail those specific companies, but I can tell you a couple of instances wherein these have failed because they actually didn't even start. So, it was all, both the parties wanted to do it, it was all fine. They just, when they came to the table, they did not come with an open mindset. See, end of the day, this is all about, A, transparency, having an open mindset, and building a situation which is a win-win situation. It's about partnership, right? So, and once you start not having that, when you come to the discussion, then in many cases, that's what's happened, that the deals didn't even go through. The second place where it has failed was the minds of the CEOs met, but when it came to execution, the sponsorship was not strong enough. Right? So the CEOs thought, okay, this is the best thing to do, but it didn't percolate down. I know someone asked a question as to where is this decision taken. Yeah, it has to be taken at the board because this is a big decision. But it's not just taking the decision, but also ensuring that there is enough accountability and enough, kind of sponsorship given to the people who actually are responsible for making this successful. And in a couple of occasions, that's what happened, right? So they started again focusing back on how can I increase my customer base. So once you start, kind of getting back to that, then you start losing focus on this. So these were instances where these failed. What Kapil said was the right point. We didn't want to intentionally bring too many failures at this point, but what we also wanted to clearly say is that all these things that we talked about, there have been certain challenges, and those challenges are important to keep in mind. But these are not unsurmountable. These are just challenges which can be managed through the various things that Kapil mentioned about. So this would be some insight on some of the examples of failures.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that although we did not bring failure cases in this, some of the challenges that we have mentioned already addressed, right? Now, for example, there have been cases, Rajesh mentioned, there have been cases where it failed because the sponsorship was not strong. There have been cases where it failed because the systems and tools, when they eventually started consolidating, was not easy to consolidate and it failed. So our challenges that we have talked about are the things that have also caused the failures, right? So it is, but by being aware of those, I would say we have in effect, indirectly addressed failures, but we did not explicitly bring out the failures because, as I said, because the nature of the sensitiveness of the information.
All right, thank you. I'll go another round. Is there any questions on the floor? Okay, I would like to ask Mr. Kabilan to sum up the presentation today.
Yeah. You go.
Either way, you want to sum it up?
Okay, so essentially in summary, just like to close off by saying that we believe that network sharing definitely provides a very high potential for telecom operators in Malaysia, right? Now, to cut costs, to optimize investments, improve margins, which in turn is what would let you focus more on your customers and let you focus more on what the customers want, which is in this case could be lower prices and higher capacity, right? I mean, those are the biggest want of the customers. However, I think we believe that Malaysian market is definitely lagging behind in terms of network sharing as compared to some of the comparable markets. Now, if you look at Australia, if you look at UK, they are all in terms of penetration comparable to Malaysia, but they are far ahead in terms of network sharing. Definitely the Malaysian market has taken the right steps. I think they have been talking about it. There have been a lot of activities going on in the field of network sharing. But I think there is a case or there is a need for it to be taken to the next level, right? And that is where I think the operators will have to start working towards, because if you don't do so, I think it's kind of inevitable that the current situation is not sustainable. EBITDA margins are going to keep going down, your investments in the capex is going to keep going down, you're going to have more dissatisfied customers, you're going to have, and then as Dada mentioned that, you're going to have issues like, capacity, speeds are going to be lower than some of the other markets which have adopted these kind of techniques, right, to improve. So your broadband speeds might be lower, you're going to have disgruntled customers. However, we believe that network sharing is definitely a very complex undertaking. It is transformational in nature, but at the same time, it is very complex and it poses several challenges in terms of operational and commercial nature, right? And that's where I believe that Malaysia needs to take its own path. These examples serve as a guide. These examples serve as a guide for you, for the operators here to think about, the challenges to think about, but not necessarily emulate them. You have to find the right path which is comfortable to the regulator, to the operators here, and which serves the customer needs, right? I think that is the end message that I would like to give. And I think the open dialogue, which the last one I mentioned, the open dialogue and joint program management teams, I think these are the crucial things for finally making it happen, right? You need to have an open dialogue which requires a mandate from the top, and then joint program management teams to kind of execute it and make it happen, right? So that's my final message, is that high potential, definitely we believe Malaysia is lagging behind, time to act is right now, but it's a complex undertaking which requires careful consideration and open dialogue, right? Thank you very much. Thank you for being patient and listening to us. And thanks NCMC for giving us the opportunity as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rajesh and Mr. Kabilan, for the presentation today.